But what I find really interesting about question time this week and last, Kieran, is you've effectively got a question time with two oppositions. So, and that has been more effective for the government than it has been for months, to zero in on Albanese, to turn everything into, every answer into an attack on Albanese. And you've got two people auditioning for the leadership, should they lose there doing it, Peter Dutton and Josh Frydenberg. Two-pronged attack, economy, national security. Economy, national security. Seems to come a little bit easier to Peter Dutton, I've got to say, being the attack dog, but both of them doing a reasonable job, and it's an approach perhaps arguably the government should have taken up months ago. Yeah. Because it's probably, at least in question, we know Parliament's been a disaster in terms of religious discrimination bill, etc., but in question time, they've done better in the last 5 days or so of question time than they have for months.
They're trying to characterise Albanese before he can finalise his own persona in the eyes of voters, although Peter Dutton did hit a little bit of an obstacle courtesy of the Speaker today. Yeah,
so this really surprised us. I mean, quite often you see, he's a new Speaker. He's obviously got the imprimatur of the Prime Minister, and yet he's ruled against the government here. Not ruled to the extent that that Peter Dutton had to withdraw his comments from last Thursday. The Speaker, Andrew Wallace, saying that you can only withdraw on the day in question. But it was these comments by Peter Dutton last week saying the Chinese government wanted Labor to win the election, and sort of indicating that he had some security information that Anthony Albanese said, I've never been briefed on anything like that. We'll hear here the Speaker's ruling on this, saying you can't do it again, Peter Dutton, and what Peter Dutton said last Thursday on this.
Even though no explicit charge was made by the Leader of the House, there was an insinuation made about the Leader of the House. I'm of the view that in context, the reference made by the Leader of the House about the Leader of the Opposition is not in order under Standing Order 90, and I would ask that such comments not be repeated.
We now see evidence, Mr Speaker, that the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, has also made a decision about who they're going to back in the next federal election, Mr Speaker. That's open. That is obvious, Mr Speaker.
The Leader of the House,
they have picked this bloke as their candidate, Mr Speaker.
Now, the Defence Minister, not the only person trying to focus on national security, the PM gravitating to that as well today.
So, as I say, Kieran, two oppositions. The government effectively acting as an opposition. Well might they, given they're behind in the polls, 45-55, 3 months out from an election. Scott Morrison warning here about what he says a vote for Labor means in terms of the approach of the federal government towards China.
It is a time to stand up to the bullies, to the autocrats who work together, not just in Europe, Mr Speaker, but also here in our own region. It is not a time for having an each-way bet on national security, Mr Speaker. It is not a time, Mr Speaker, for appeasement and the trading away of Australian values in search of appeasement, Mr Speaker.
As you mentioned, not just Peter Dutton leading the charge on the Anthony Albanese front, but Josh Frydenberg as well, trying to go to historical examples of Albanese's approach on the economy, so much so that the opposition leader tried to mock that in his answer today.
That's right. So 30 years ago, he told a Labor conference, 5 or 6 years before he was in the Parliament, the story was in the Australian, that there should be death duties. Josh Frydenberg went on about this last week. And so Anthony Albanese's pulled out an economics essay from university, and he has said here, well, I'll table this. You'll see what I said about how we should have a kind of neoliberal economy.
On the Greens website, a 30-year project for the leader of the Labor Party, death duties, Mr Speaker, death duties and inheritance tax.
I seek leave to table the neoclassical theory of the competitive market system, an essay of mine from first-year economics at Sydney University, written on the 7th of August, 1981.
The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat.
So a bit of humour there, Kieran. Look, I think one area that and we heard a little bit of it in question time, where Labor is weak is on asylum seekers. And we saw with the Rudd government come in, a heap of boats came in, people drowned, and they were perceived as really weak there. We heard a bit from Peter Dutton there. Anthony Albanese's argued for open borders at Labor conferences over the years. That's something they can hit him with, which would hurt a bit more than something he said 30 years ago at a conference.